Story 1. The Guest in the Third Cabin. We had been planning this Airbnb getaway for months. 2 cabins on a remote property by the river, just for me, my girlfriend Jade, and our friends, another couple, Mark and Lisa. It sounded perfect, a chance to unwind and enjoy each other's company. We got there as the sun was setting below the horizon. The place had a total of 3 cabins. Jade and I would take one, Mark and Lisa would take the other, and as for the third, well, we weren't sure who was in the third cabin. There was a car parked outside though, so it appeared that someone was there. Not paying it much attention, we began settling into our cabins as night fell. Our cabins were cozy little one-bedrooms with small kitchens and living areas, and small decks that overlooked the river in the distance. They had that countryside charm you see in travel magazines. The property was great too. There was a community campfire area down by the river, a picnic table, a small deck right on the river, and even a place to load canoes in if you wanted to do some floating. After settling in, we headed down to the campfire area. It was a beautiful night, and the sound of the water made for a perfect backdrop. We were cracking jokes, reminiscing about college days, and just really soaking in the moment. I remember looking over at the third cabin at one point. It was pitch black, no lights on, and no sign of life. "Kinda weird for a place with a car parked outside," I said, but we shrugged it off and got back to our stories and beers. We didn't know it at the time, but from that moment on, our adventure would begin to unravel. As we were sitting by the fire, enjoying each other's company, Lisa jumped in her seat a little bit and let out a gasp. We all looked over to see what had startled her. In the distance, just outside the campfire's light, was a man, just standing there, watching us. Recognizing that he had been noticed, he slowly made his way over to us. It was the guest in the third cabin. He was a rough-looking guy, and he looked on edge. He asked if he could join us, and we didn't want to be rude, so we said sure. But as he sat down, the vibe completely changed. The guy was odd, asking personal questions that felt too invasive for a first meeting. He had this intense look, making it hard to keep eye contact. We tried to be friendly, but it was tough. The fun atmosphere we had going took a nosedive. Eventually, it became so thick and oppressive that somebody had to do something. Finally, Mark spoke up. "Well, it's getting late. I think we're going to get to bed." As he said this, he gave me a look as if to non-verbally say, "You'd better do the same." I took the cue and indicated that Jade and I would be retiring to our cabin also. As we walked away, the man said 2 words, "Sweet dreams," and then just stared into the fire in a way that made all of us feel uneasy. After arriving back at the cabin, Jade and I talked about how creepy the man was, and then got ready for bed after making sure that the door was locked. Around 10 p.m., we finally fell asleep. A few hours later, around 1 a.m., I woke up on my own. I had this weird feeling in my gut, so I got up out of bed and peeked out the front window. To my surprise, the odd man was still there, by the fire, alone, just staring into the dying flames. It was creepy, like something out of a horror movie, but at the same time, he wasn't doing us any harm just sitting there, so I tried to shake it off and went back to bed. The next morning, the guy's car was gone. Great, he's left, I thought, feeling relieved. The others were just as happy. We spent the day enjoying various activities. We went for a hike, took pictures, and even played in the river a little bit. But as evening rolled in, and we were walking back to our cabins, we saw that the car was back. "Damn," I muttered out loud. Not wanting to have another odd encounter, we all agreed to hang out in one cabin that night. Nobody was in the mood to bump into Mr. Creepy again. After some time over at our cabin, Mark and Lisa decided to head back to their own. As they did, they saw him, alone by the fire again. As Jade and I got ready for bed, we discussed options for what we could do on our last day. Eventually, we decided that we'd figure it out in the morning and fell asleep. A few hours later, that sleep was interrupted by urgent knocking on our door. It was Mark and Lisa, scared out of their wits. "Someone was peeking through our window," Lisa said in a panic. The mood instantly shifted, and everyone was on high alert. "Was it the guy in the third cabin?" Jade asked. We don't know. All we saw was a silhouette, and we knew that you guys wouldn't do something like that, Mark replied. Deciding to take a look, I slowly walked over to the door and peeked my head out to get a look at the third cabin. Once again, there was nothing. No lights, no movement, no nothing. Only the lonely car sitting there in the dark. Stay calm, I told everyone, but my heart was racing. Let's just all huddle up here and we'll call the host in the morning. And so that's what we did. The next morning, the reply from the host took us completely off guard. There shouldn't be anyone in the third cabin, she said. Only the first 2 cabins should be occupied. The news sent a shock through all of us. Upon hearing it, Jade did just as I had done earlier and peeked her head out the front door to get a look at the third cabin. The car is gone, she said. Eventually, the cops made their way out. A search ensued, but there was no trace of the creepy man. What they did find, however, was evidence that whoever this person was, he discreetly broke a small area of a window to unlock it and enter into the cabin. The cops took our statement, and we did our best to provide a description of the man and his vehicle. But the man never returned, and was never found. That weekend was supposed to be a break from our regular lives, but it ended up being a story we'd tell for years to come, not for the reasons we'd hoped. Every time I think about it, I get this uneasy feeling, like we dodged something serious. It's strange how a place so serene can harbor something so unsettling. Ever since then, I've been a bit more cautious about where we stay, and who else may be staying there. You just never know who you might run into. Story 2. There's Someone in the Woods. Our Airbnb getaway began as a dream, a weekend escape to a secluded cabin in the heart of the woods. Gabby, my fiancée, and I were seeking a peaceful retreat from our busy lives and the whirlwind of wedding planning. The cabin, nestled in a thick forest, seemed like a hidden gem. The drive to the cabin was a journey into tranquility, the city's noise fading behind us as we ventured deeper into the wilderness. Upon arrival, the cabin was as picturesque as its online photos, a beautiful haven surrounded by nature's beauty. We spent the first day exploring the surrounding woods. Gabby's laughter, free and unburdened, echoed through the trees, creating a sense of blissful isolation. That evening, we prepared a modest yet delicious dinner in the quaint kitchen. The cabin's ambiance, enhanced by the soft glow of candles and the warmth of the fireplace, made the meal feel intimate. We retired early, contented by the day's adventures. The serene atmosphere of our first day, however, did not last. On the second day, as I was preparing breakfast, Gabby stepped out to retrieve something from the car. I was sipping away on my coffee when a sudden scream pierced the morning calm. My heart leaped, and I dropped what I was doing and rushed towards the door. As I did, Gabby burst back in, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "There's someone in the woods," she exclaimed, her voice trembling. "I saw someone watching me from the trees." "Are you sure?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think so," she replied, her gaze darting back towards the ominous woods. We cautiously stepped outside, scanning the tree line for any sign of the mysterious watcher. The woods were still, the only sound being the gentle rustle of leaves and the normal sounds of nature. We walked a little further, eyes straining through the shadows and foliage, but there was no one there. "Maybe it was just your imagination," I suggested. Gabby nodded slowly, her eyes still fixed on the trees. "Yeah, maybe," she agreed, though I could tell she wasn't entirely convinced. "Come on," I said as I gave her a little kiss on the cheek. "Some eggs and toast will make you feel better." She gave a slight chuckle, and we made our way back inside. Trying to put the unsettling incident behind us, Gabby and I resumed cooking breakfast. Still a bit shaken, Gabby apologized for the scare. "I'm sorry, I just got spooked out there," she said, her voice still carrying a tremor. I quickly assured her, "Hey, no need to apologize. These woods can play tricks on anyone's eyes." I could tell she was trying to put the incident behind her, eager to return to the sense of normalcy we had planned for this getaway. After breakfast, Gabby, looking more like her usual self, suggested we head out to a nearby overlook. "It's supposed to have a great view. Could be a nice way to spend the morning," she said with a smile. I agreed, thinking a walk might be just what we needed to shake off the morning's odd start. We got ready and set off, following a narrow path that wound through the dense woods toward the overlook. As we walked, the beauty of the forest gradually eased the tension from our shoulders. The sun filtered through the leaves, the birds chirped, and the scent of pine was in the air. It was nature in all its glory. Along our hike, though, something caught my eye. Just off the path, there was a log. There was nothing unusual about the log itself, but what made me pause was the ground beneath it. The leaves and dirt appeared disturbed, as if someone had been sitting there, their feet shuffling and scuffing the ground below. It was a reminder of Gabby's earlier scare, and for a moment I felt a chill run down my spine. However, I chose not to mention it to Gabby. I didn't want to reignite her fear or spoil our walk. We continued on our way, though on the inside I was on high alert. The overlook, when we reached it, was breathtaking. A vast panorama of the forest spread out before us, the river winding like a silver ribbon in the distance. For a while we stood there in silence, taking in the view. It was moments like these that we had come for. A chance to connect with nature and each other, away from the worries of the world. On our way back from the overlook, Gabby and I were in high spirits, though I was still somewhat on guard. We joked and laughed, holding hands as we strolled through the woods. The rest of the day was spent in lazy contentment. We played some board games, cooked a simple yet delicious meal together, and as the evening set in, we decided to watch a movie. After the movie, we nestled into bed, and after a few minutes, we both fell asleep. A few hours later, a noise at the front door jerked me awake. I lay there for a moment, straining my ears in the darkness. Gabby was still asleep beside me, and I didn't want to wake her with what I hoped was just my imagination running wild again. Moving as silently as I could, I got out of bed and tiptoed towards the front door to investigate. As I approached it, I could see a shadow moving through the window. I couldn't make out what it was, but I told myself that it was probably just some animal. As I inched closer, though, my face now only a few inches from the door's window, a jolt of shock snapped through me when a man suddenly stepped into view. We were just feet apart, separated only by the glass of the door. Our eyes locked, and I could see the shock in his eyes as clearly as he could see mine. Panic surged through me. Without thinking, I yelled, "Hey!" as loud as I could. Gabby's voice, filled with panic and confusion, called out from the bedroom, "What's happening?" The man, startled by my yell, turned and ran into the woods. My heart still racing, I ensured that the door was locked and rushed back to the bedroom. "Someone was outside," I said to Gabby, trying to keep my voice steady. "I saw him right at the front door." Gabby sat up, her eyes wide with fear. "What do we do?" she asked. "We need to leave immediately," I said urgently. "It'll take hours for the cops to get here, if we can even get a signal." She nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. She scrambled out of bed, hastily throwing on her clothes. My mind raced with thoughts of the man at the door and the earlier incident with Gabby. Had he been watching us this whole time? We hurried to the car, not bothering to pack our belongings. Every second felt precious, and my only thought was to put as much distance as possible between us and the cabin. As we sped away, I looked at the cabin in the rearview mirror, watching what was supposed to be a blissful weekend with my fiancée disappear into the darkness. Back in town, we contacted the police. They promised to check out the cabin, but by the time they made their way out there, the man was long gone. They found nothing but the quiet woods and our abandoned weekend home. As I recounted the events to the officers, a wave of disappointment washed over me. I should have taken Gabby more seriously when she first mentioned seeing someone in the woods. The signs were there: Gabby's sighting, the disturbed area near the log. I had dismissed them, thinking I was being overly cautious. In doing so, I had put us both in danger. That night, as I lay in bed in the safety of our own home, I made a silent promise to always trust our instincts, to be more aware of our surroundings, and to never underestimate the potential dangers, even in the most serene settings. The experience had been a harsh reminder of the unpredictability of the world, even in places where we seek refuge and peace. Never again, I said to myself, would my neglect put us at risk. Story 3. Horror at the Beach House. Last year, my girlfriend Emily and I decided to rent out an Airbnb for a nice, relaxing weekend. We were a new couple, having only began dating just a few short weeks ago. This trip was our first big adventure together, and I was looking forward to it. We settled on a house on the beach. It was a beautiful place, isolated and surrounded by the vast expanse of the ocean. It seemed perfect. We arrived at the charming little rental on a Friday afternoon with Bo tagging along. Bo is Emily's dog, a 4-year-old golden retriever that enjoys snacks, laying around, and lots of attention. He's been with Emily ever since he was about 6 weeks old, and she can't go anywhere without him. The first evening at the rental was idyllic. We walked along the beach, played with Bo, and even waded around in the ocean a little bit. It was what we had come for, and we were soaking up every minute of it. But as night fell, the atmosphere shifted. We were sitting on the deck, listening to the sound of the waves, when Bo started growling, his gaze fixed on the beach. I tried to see what he was looking at, but the beach was covered in darkness. Emily and I didn't think too much of it. Everyone knows how dogs can get, growling and barking at absolutely nothing. We would soon discover, though, that it wasn't nothing. The next morning, we found something unsettling. Footprints in the sand, right below our deck. They for sure weren't ours. There was something else too, something very disturbing, a message written in the sand that simply said, "I'm watching." Emily tried to brush it off as a prank, but I could see the unease in her eyes. The isolation of the place, once comforting, now felt eerie, as if we were exposed and vulnerable. We tried to put the incident out of our minds, writing it off as some kids passing by on the beach playing around with us or something. Instead, we focused on enjoying our day. We swam in the ocean, built sandcastles with Bo, and tried to soak in the beauty of our surroundings. But the feeling of being watched lingered. That evening, things escalated. As we arrived back at the house, again we found footprints in the sand. This time they led to the back door. As we cautiously entered, Bo trailed behind us. What we saw inside turned my stomach. Our beach house, our haven, was wrecked. The fridge was open, its contents spilled across the floor. Our bed sheets, soaked, were piled in the shower. I felt a mix of anger and fear. Who would do this? Bo's growls broke the eerie silence, sending chills down my spine. I quickly called the police and our Airbnb host, my voice shaking with every word. The police arrived and scoured the place. We told them about the footprints and the message in the sand. They took our statements and asked us if we thought about anybody who could have done this and why. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't think of a single person who would want to do something like this. Emily, on the other hand, was eerily quiet. She mostly sat in the corner and stared out at the beach, like she was contemplating something. In the end, though, the cops found nothing concrete, and suggested that we had left the back door unlocked. Emily and I exchanged a look of doubt, though. We were sure we had locked it. Despite everything, we decided to stay another night. I couldn't let this incident drive us away from our weekend retreat. It was our first big weekend together, and I wanted to salvage as much of it as I could. As night fell, we settled into bed, and Bo cozied up by our feet. All was well, until suddenly, in the middle of the night, Bo became restless. His ears perked up, and he stared at the bedroom door with a slight growl. Just as I was about to tell him that everything was okay, I heard a faint sound at the back door. "Did you hear that?" I asked Emily. "Yeah," she replied with a look of fear glazed over her face. With my heart pounding, I got out of bed and crept out of the bedroom and towards the back door. Bo, now more alert than ever, stayed on the bed with Emily, but began to growl even louder. As I made my way around the corner, my heart completely dropped as the back door came into view. There, by the door, was a silhouette of someone. They were just standing there, and they were inside the house. Instinct took over, and I flung on the lights to get a better look at whoever it was that was standing in the house. As the light flicked on, I got a look at the intruder, and instantly everything made sense. It was Emily's ex-boyfriend. She had told me about him, a volatile relationship that had ended badly. He had struggled to accept the breakup, and had made several attempts to contact her since. The thought that he might have followed us here, to this isolated place, was terrifying. I confronted him, demanding to know what he was doing there. Instead of an answer, though, he lunged at me, and in the ensuing struggle, Emily appeared and screamed, trying to pull him off. It was chaos, shouting, lots of cursing, things being knocked over. It wasn't until Beau, who had been barking incessantly, finally joined into the struggle that Emily's ex finally relented and bolted back out the door. It was a chaotic few moments, and everything happened so quickly. My heart was pounding like a jackhammer in my chest, and it took me a moment to process what had just happened. We made another call, and before long, the police were once again on the scene, this time having a lot more to work with. A few days later, the ex was finally located, arrested, and charged with a long list of offenses. It took some time for Emily and me to deal with the aftermath of the incident. We would later find out that the ex had access to Emily's email and was able to obtain the key code for the back door of the house. Looking back at our stay at that Airbnb, the experience casted a dark shadow over what was meant to be a peaceful getaway. The drive back was quiet, each of us lost in our thoughts, processing the events. Our relationship had gotten off to a rocky start, not by our own doing, of course. But in the end, I feel like it made us lean on each other, helping to strengthen our relationship for the long run.